Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can all hear me. Owen, again, our very gracious kind of tech master behind the scenes. He's just been giving me a little prod to make sure that my microphone is all set up correctly and that I can hear you all. Great, I'm seeing a few thumbs up there. That's wonderful. I'm hoping you should all be able to see my PowerPoint presentation, which is up on the screen right now. If at any point I don't know, you something doesn't seem right. I don't necessarily mean with the content, which of course will be amazing. But if you lose audio or the image disappears, please put something in the chat. I've got it open on my second screen, so I will try and address that in the moment. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name's John, and I've very kindly been given this opportunity to run a workshop with you. And as the title suggests, we're going for some broad philosophical concepts regarding order, chaos, the nature of the universe. But in a more practical sense, we're going to be talking about structuring your story and how to think about plot and working with a page count when writing a story. It's a personal belief of mine that comics as a medium are almost entirely about restrictions. It's about working within a limit. And I think those things can actually be quite liberating. Invention being the mother of... No, wait, necessity being the mother of invention. Anyway, the point is you can do a lot with a little, and that's what we're going to talk about in tonight's workshop. So... hang on, wrong. There we go. Okay. So, here's a little overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. There's the artist in his natural environment, which is just kind of gurning like an idiot in the kitchen. Here's a little rundown of what we're going to be doing. I'm just going to give a little introduction about myself, what I'm up to, what my involvement in comics is, if only so that you have some idea of who on earth is talking to you tonight and why you should listen to them, although you probably shouldn't, in all fairness. There's also going to be a group exercise. Now, please don't panic. This is entirely optional. You in no way have to do anything if you don't want to. But I've posted a link in the chat, which will take you to a Dropbox folder where you can find a couple of resources. So it's a couple of PDFs. One is a short story, a short comic story, and the other is the script for that story. We're not going to be going over the script in detail this session, so please don't worry. But if at a later date you'd like to reference the script when referring to the story, I've put it in there as well, just in case it proves useful for you to see kind of what helped the story come to life, basically. So what we're going to do is, after I've introduced myself, I'm going to give you a little introduction to the group exercise. Then, as I continue talking, it's just something to kind of keep in mind as we're going through. So don't worry, it's not strict homework or anything like that, because at the end of the session, after I kind of talk about planning your story and some of the processes I employ, we're going to come back to the group exercise. I'm going to work through it myself, and then you can kind of compare notes with what you've come up with. And if at any point you want to comment on something, please feel free to put it in the chat. If I don't respond to it in the moment, we'll come back to it at the end of the session, because we're going to be there's a point where we'll be discussing questions and comics at the end. So getting started, who on earth am I? Well, my name is John, and I'm a comic writer, editor, and I think that's probably fair. I'm a writer and an editor, and I've been working in the kind of UK comic scene for over a decade now. I kind of my very first show that I exhibited at was London Super Comic Con in February 2012, when I was but a lad, and since then I have I don't know. It's been quite a wild decade. A lot's kind of happened in that time. Some of you may know me or know of my kind of primary series, which is Afterlife Inc., which is something I've been working on for quite a while now. Just last year, we hit our 10-year anniversary. So yeah, and in that time, I've self-published six individual volumes. Did the whole run again as two big hardbacks, which was the project at the tail end of last year. I've also done a crossover with my good friend and colleague Nick Angel's comic Seven String. So I think it's fair to say that Afterlife Inc. has been kind of my baby in this time. And speaking of Nick, and speaking of some of my other ventures, I am the co-founder of Big Punch Studios, which has become. I guess it's fair to say we're quite a familiar face in the UK comics scene. So we've been there's 4 people in the team. It's myself and my wife Lucy, and then our good friends and colleagues Nick and Ali, also a married couple. And the 4 of us together, we're writers, we're editors, we're colorists, letterers. Ali's a filmmaker, a very skilled one at that, and Nick is Nick is the only one of us who can actually draw. Nick is an artist, and in the time we've been working together, we started out as just friends, then we formed a partnership, then we incorporated as a limited company in 2015. Which sounds very grand, but was really just because we wanted to create a better engine for bringing our stories to light, kind of getting them out into the world. So we're a relatively unusual kind of model because we're a bit like a publishing house in that we only publish our own work. So yeah, we've tried to do everything that quote unquote makes you a real company. And then we just became incredibly insular and just kind of looked inwards and focused on our own stuff. So under Big Punch, which became this kind of machine for this banner, if you will, this umbrella term for getting our work out, we've published Afterlife Inc. So we kind of created our own system for making my series Afterlife Inc., not to mention getting Nick's comic Seven String out into the world and getting our collaborative comics, which all 4 of us have worked on. We did an anthology series called Extraversal. So for 4 years, we said to ourselves, you know what, we're only getting graphic novels out maybe once a year, once every 2 years. How can we up our productivity? And so we had the idea of, why don't we do a quarterly magazine? So for 4 years, we published a quarterly magazine. So what's that? 16 issues in total. It was a 46-page full-color comic, which we got out every 3 months. Yes, I can do maths. And it was quite a punishing schedule, but it was very educational. And it wasn't just Nick drawing all of it. We work with a number of freelancers. For example, Afterlife Inc., which really is my baby. I'm the writer on it, showrunner, if you will. And I'm also the editor because I can't draw to save my life. I am reliant on other people to make me look good. So it's a decade of Afterlife Inc. for sure, but it's also a decade of trading on other people's talent. So I think when I was getting the content together for the 2 hardbacks, which was about 800 odd pages, I want to say. I was tallying it up, and I think about 60 artists had worked on the series over the years. We've always tried to pay people for their work. I appreciate that we've never been able to offer, say, Marvel or DC rates, and I think initially we couldn't offer a crazy amount at all, but gradually, and this is something I'm quite proud of, we've been able to increase our offering to freelancers over the years. So we try to treat people right and pay promptly. So just some random blurry photos from my phone to show you where we're at currently. Post the pandemic, we're getting back into the convention scene. This is a photo of our stand at MCM London last October. with myself and Nick went down for the long weekend. I could probably fill a whole other workshop talking about the trials and tribulations of dealing with the new management team at MCM, which is particularly interesting. And I'm also aware that, given their new criteria, not everyone is so lucky as to be able to get in. I can only say that post the pandemic, we've had as many successes with MCM as we've had failures, by which I mean trying to gain admission into the Artist Alley. So I don't know if we're getting any better at that, but we're starting to learn how to deal with the new management because, we, as a lot of people on the Discord, a lot of people in the UK comics community have been going there for years. And for us, at least, it's our favourite show. The other slightly blurry photo is of our storage unit. This is where we keep a lot of our stock, and these 2 pallets were some of the shipment I was putting together for the fulfillment of the Afterlife Inc. 10th anniversary Kickstarter. I swear I'll stop talking about myself in a moment, but I just want to mention that with Big Punch, we've also produced card games. The Sandwich Masters is, well, frankly, I was going to say our main one, but it's our only one, really. We did Sandwich Masters, and we also have the first expansion pack, Bread Rolls, which came out. No, we finished fulfilling it the start of last year. We did that as a Kickstarter originally, and both games are currently available to buy on Amazon and in a variety of shops worldwide. Nick is also the creator of the award-winning solo tabletop RPG Colossal, which I would like to claim some involvement with, but I can't. It was entirely a solo project. He went off and did it on his own, sneakily, and just completely took the world by storm. So Nick, who I have the pleasure of working with during the week, he's a very talented artist, but he's also a very talented game designer, and he has the award to prove it now. In addition to my work in comics, I've been working in video games as well as a freelance writer. I was the writer of Spectacular Sparky, which was a game developed by Freakzone Games and published by Nicalis, which came out on Switch, all the other places, Steam and the like. That came out a couple of years ago, I want to say. I was also the writer on not the Lego Batman movie game, but a browser-based tie-in game based on the Lego Batman movie, which is a weird little claim to fame because I think the original promise was that I'd be writing dialogue for Will Arnett to voice, which I did. I wrote all the dialogue, and to be honest, I'm not sure if they used any of it, as in I don't know if the game was even voiced in the end, but that's what I was commissioned to do, and that's what I delivered on. And the really cool thing I've been working on recently, which was announced in the last couple of weeks, is I am the writer of Toxic Crusaders, which is the new game coming out from Retroware and Troma Entertainment, which in the style of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge. It's going to be a kind of old beat-em-up pixel art style. Been working on this for about a year now in secret. And those of you who are old enough may remember the 1991 cartoon that this is based on. The game serves as a sequel to the cartoon. And those among us who are older still may remember the original Toxic Avenger movie from the 80s, which the kid-friendly cartoon was based on. So yeah, that's kind of just where I'm at the moment. Just kind of bring that up to say that I don't know. I've lived a colourful life over the past decade, and while I in no way claim to be an expert, I absolutely don't. The methods I'm going to be talking about in the kind of workshop tonight, they're just things which I've used myself. They've kind of proved useful, and I hope they will for you too. So please take everything with a pinch of salt and feel free to kind of chop and change and edit it as you see fit. So in terms of a group exercise tonight, if you'd like to get involved, what I'm imagining we would do is that we would plan out an original 8-page comic. So we'd go from a kind of an initial idea. we'd kind of develop a loose outline of everything that's going to happen, and then we're going to break it down into pages. So the way I imagine this working is, in a moment, I'm going to present a story prompt on the screen. I would suggest that if you want to get involved, all you'll need is something to write on, so pencil and paper, or possibly a keyboard if you're working on, I imagine you're currently viewing this on a computer. So don't worry, you're not going to share anything you've worked on unless you want to. This is a very private thing, but I'm going to give you the story prompt in a moment. And then as I then go on to explain some of the methods and tools we're going to be employing, you can start kind of working on that in private, just kind of thinking about some of these ideas and how to apply them to the story. When we get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to go through a story prompt and kind of like show my own response to it. And while there will be a ton, probably infinite different ways of interpreting this story, I'm just going to show you mine. Not to say that mine is the right way, but you could kind of just compare it and see how your own approach kind of differs. So I went on earlier this afternoon, I went on a random story prompt generator, and I got this. So my challenge to you is that we're going to be telling a short story that has to involve these elements. So a floating island, a message in a bottle, a creature in love, and an alternate power source. Now, use all of them. Use none. I mean, I think if you're going to use none, it kind of defeats the point, really. But we're not taking this too seriously. It's just a bit of fun. So, I'll tell you what I will do. I will just copy those down, and I will. He said, I'm going to copy them down. Where have I put them? Yes, I'm going to put them in the chat now, so you've got something to refer to. So again, a floating island, a message in a bottle, a creature in love, and alternate power source. Okay, so I've just stuck that in the chat in case it's of use for people. Again, don't worry too much. We're going to be coming back to that in good time. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so the kind of the real gist of what we're talking about tonight, we're going to be planning a story. And this is why I've shared the resources in the chat. So what I've provided you with is a PDF of a 10-page comic that I produced as a special feature for the Book of Death, which was one of the collected editions of Afterlife Inc. So, like I said, we're giving you a digital copy of that in the chat. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to go through the process of developing that story from an original idea. So we're going to be kind of like retro engineering it. And I've included the comic so that you can compare the final product. So we'll be sharing this, this presentation when it's done. So don't feel you have to read the comic in the moment. It's just there for you to come back to later. So yeah, we're going to start with writing a summary, then writing an overview, next breaking it down in page plan, and then finally breaking down your story into the smallest measurement in the universe, which is a panel. Just because the quark is to matter, a panel is to comics. And we'll have a visual example to guide us along in the form of this daft little story called The Golden Age, which I wrote and which was illustrated by the incredible Gav Mitchell, who, I mean, is a genuine powerhouse in the UK comic scene. He is absolutely incredible. Okay, so my original idea for a story was that I wanted to tell a story. So, sorry, I should say, for context, my comic, Afterlife Inc., is about a con artist named Jack Fortune who dies, discovers an afterlife in chaos, and then decides to take over and run it like a business. I apologise, I appreciate the context is everything. So, when I was putting together this bonus story for the Book of Death, I said to myself, I really want to do a Superman story, caveated with the idea of doing a Superman story that was also legally distinct enough that we wouldn't get into any kind of copyright issues. It was very much meant to be an homage to the character. So I had this initial vague idea. What would happen if Superman died, or what if the fictional idea of Superman died, and upon arriving in the afterlife, he was actually kind of split into every conceivable incarnation of Superman there'd ever been, going all the way back to like the George Reeve kind of black and white Superman, up to like the Zack Snyder Superman, the long-haired Superman of the 90s. Basically, it was going to be about the idea of Superman and what happens when an idea dies but is very persistent and then keeps coming back. So it's meant to be a comment on a character constantly being rebooted over the years. And this was paired with my general feeling at the time that I'd just quit my day job, which I'd had for like years and years and years, and I was feeling a bit kind of exhausted and burnt out and excited, and I was thinking like, well, I'm about to begin work on Volume 7 of Afterlife Inc. How do I regain the magic, and how do I get my protagonist Jack to regain his fire in the process? So these are my two concepts. The vague idea, I wanted to do something about the concept of Superman and rebooting characters, and I wanted to have my main character get his mojo back, basically. So the first stage, I think, in developing any story, once you've got the initial idea, is to write a summary. So it's important to say, I've had ideas. When I was younger, I had a lot of big kind of story ideas. I had a lot of big comics planned. And the challenging part was getting them out into the world. I just had no idea how to do that. And I think looking back on it, even before you start to factor in finding an artist, assembling a team, getting it printed, finding the money, before you get to all that, my biggest issue was I couldn't explain my story to anyone, because my stories at the time were too complex. They were not necessarily good, but they were dense, because they were 101 ideas all pulling in different directions. It was less a story as it was my kind of like teenage self trying to work out who I was, work out the kind of stories I wanted to tell, exploring the universe, basically. So I needed to simplify. I needed to get back right to the core of what my stories were about. So a big part of that is being able to summarize it. Now, some people might refer to this as, the elevator pitch. And basically, it's what will help you sell your comic. Now, on the one hand, what do I mean by sell? I mean, well, literally sell it if you ever want to kind of make money off it, because you have to be able to summarize and pitch your comic to a customer. But also selling an idea to anyone, getting them invested. Even if you're telling a friend, how do you get a friend to care about your story? And the only way to do that is to know what it's about yourself, so you can very concisely get it across to people. So this is where I like to challenge myself and anyone who's listening to summarize your story in one sentence. So for me, one sentence of this story, The Golden Age, is: an overworked Jack Fortune must intervene when a deceased superhero arrives in the Empyrean, creating chaos for Afterlife Inc. Again, for clarity, the Empyrean is the afterlife of my comic. So once you've described it in a sentence, then let's do it again, just for the sake of repetition, for the sake of kind of working out the kinks. Can you summarize your story in a paragraph? So now go into slightly more detail. So for me, it's this. As CEO, Jack Fortune wrestles with the demand of his high-pressure job, a new crisis emerges in the form of Superman, a fictional superhero whose all-too-real death is causing untold problems for Afterlife Inc. Intervening, Jack encounters multiple incarnations of the iconic hero, regaining some of his lost fire in the process. So yeah, that is the kind of crux of a summary, basically. Say it in a sentence, and then go into a bit more detail to say it in a paragraph. That's where you start you might start describing some of the key themes and concepts you're going to touch upon. A few of the things I like to think about when I'm writing a summary are the key developments and a key question. So no one's ever going to see these but you, but the key developments, you can just bullet point them saying, what are the things that need to happen for my story to occur? So as you can see here, I've just written down some bullet points. Now, this is where I'm already having a few ideas about how this story is going to pan out. So I'm thinking, okay, so we've got the countless versions of Superman or Supermans, and I think they're all going to be battling each other. So that's where I have this big vision in mind, big golden clouds, and in the mix of it, just these indistinct figures of supermen kind of beating each other to a pulp. It's chaos. That's what I'm imagining. I also think because this is going to be about reboots and about constantly reimagining a character, I want to kind of talk about the bad stuff. I want to talk about what happens when people take an iconic hero who's meant to represent something golden, and when they make them kind of dark and menacing because of, a desire to make them more adult. So as you can see, I reckon we're going to have an encounter with the dark mirror image of Superman, and then we will have the true Superman, whatever that means. So the Superman who is the true iconic idea that originally inspired the character. I think it's also quite useful to think about a key question. Again, none of this is essential. No one's ever going to come and check your homework. No one's ever going to demand to see your key question. But this is about getting everything lined up in your own head before you even progress to writing the story. So for me, it's, will Jack learn something from Superman that will help him regain his fire? So in terms of the kind of group exercise that's happening in the background, again, you're not going to get marked on this, but if you'd like, if you're already thinking about what your story might be, the story that's going to incorporate a floating island, a message in the bottle, so on and so forth, maybe think about, can I describe that in a sentence? Can I describe it in a paragraph? That sort of thing. Again, do as much or as little as you'd like to, but this is where you start the initial kind of steps to getting your story, the story out there. It's basically asking yourself, what is it going to be about? Can I explain it to myself? Because the moment I understand that, that's half the battle, because now I can focus on making the customer, the reader, an editor, a commissioning publisher, I can make them care after the fact. So yeah, if you'd like, maybe think about a sentence summary, maybe think about a paragraph. You can start listing key developments and maybe a key question. So the next step is writing an overview. So I have intentionally, whenever I do a PowerPoint presentation, which is relatively rare, I do try to keep the amount of text on the page minimal. I've kind of deliberately broken that rule in this section because I want to give some indication as to how messy an overview can be. So some people I call it an overview. Some people might call it a treatment. You might call it a synopsis. I like to think of this as the stage in which you just start writing. So turn on the tap, turn on the faucet. Just let the creativity kind of flow out, because at this point there are absolutely no wrong answers. What you should be absolutely comfortable doing at this point is getting any idea, no matter how big or small, in any order as it comes to you, down on the page. You can tidy it up later, but right now, don't worry about writing from the beginning to the middle to the end. If you want to do it in reverse, end, middle, beginning, or in any order that comes to you, all that matters is that you get those things down on the page. So anytime I write an overview for a story, it's very messy. It's an absolute state because I'm just throwing stuff down. Sometimes I might have a very clear idea for a scene or a moment in my head, like almost as if it's writing itself. I can picture camera angles, dialogue, it's perfect. And I will get that down in minute detail. But then the next scene, I might be like, oh, heck, what happens? Oh, I don't know. So-and-so talks to this other character. And that's all I'll write. Because that's all I know. That's all I know to write at the moment. I have no idea how that scene's going to pan out in reality. So so don't worry about giving everything the same level of attention. You're just getting what you have down on the page. And you know, if I write 2 pages describing a moment, that's great. That's, you know, incredibly granular detail. If I write 5 words, okay, yes, it's a lot more vague. I can fill in the details later. But what's important is that you have a sense of the space in your head or in the story that these moments are occupying. If you don't get it down on the page, then it almost doesn't exist. So what I've done here is I have included just the rough stream of consciousness thoughts that I tried to get onto the page when I was thinking of this story. So for me, I pictured this scene where Jack, our protagonist, is sitting at the desk. He's surrounded by mountains of paperwork, and he just looks really disheartened, like he's having a bad time of it. Then we're going to juxtapose that with him getting a call from one of his employees, Marie, and she, is calling to tell him that something kind of exciting, amazing, terrible is happening. And the thing at this point with Jack is that clearly he's not enjoying the paperwork. He'd almost rather be in the midst of a crisis, even if he's likely to get seriously hurt, because he's looking for any excuse to get out of that, basically. I've said here, I imagine a very particular comedic beat, because for me, Jack is trying to slack off, and the person stopping him from slacking off is Lux. Now, some of you may know Lux, some of you may not, but Lux is another character from the comic who is the one who generally tries to keep Jack in check and stops him kind of acting up or acting out, basically. So I have this comedic beat where in my head I just knew, even though I didn't have the exact mechanics of it yet, I knew that Jack would be having a bit of a sulk, and then he suddenly discovers that Lux isn't there to keeping him in check, and then he perks up, and I'm like, okay, I think I can make that into a comedic beat. I then pictured that we'd hard cut to the kind of scene of the crisis. We'd kind of have Jack running for his life amidst all these kind of explosions. This is, again, a juxtaposition between the calm of the previous scene, the action of this scene, Jack, kind of craving action. And then the moment he's in it, it's kind of hell, it's madness, it's explosions. But this is what he wanted, so I guess be careful what you kind of wish for. And again, as you can see from my notes here, they're messy. It's really just, sometimes it's a description of action or specific events that have to occur. Other times it's just an emotion I'm trying to convey. So I'm trying to get across that Jack is overworked, he's disheartened. There's some dialogue on this page where we see that he's not at his best. This kind of charismatic, con artist, charlatan with a heart of gold we've gotten to know across all the books. He's having an off day, basically. And I also want to establish in this point some of the rules of this bizarre situation, because I imagine that these abstract versions of Superman, they're all fighting each other. They're all kind of battling for supremacy to kind of see who is going to be the true incarnation of the character. So, I want to demonstrate that. I want the reader to learn through action that when one Superman defeats another, they dissolve into kind of golden dust. So there's something unreal. There's something not quite right about the rules here. So yeah, we have to make sure that the audience is along for the ride on this and that they're not confused by what's happening. And finally, at the bottom, I've made a point for, legal reasons. While this is clearly Superman, we should shy away from using the S, which is trademarked like you wouldn't believe. So I'm just like, let's try and be clever when we depict this character. And I apologized to Gav in advance when I wrote in the script, because I'm like, I want to make this challenging for you, basically. We have to make sure it's undoubtedly Superman without ever showing that it's Superman. So yeah, the action continues. I imagine that Anna Hell is going to pop up. So Anna Hell is another character from the book, a very powerful being in the afterlife. He's going to pop up and save Jack from some of these violent Supermen. Pardon me, just having a sip of my drink. And I want there to be a bit of a comedic moment. I've always liked the idea of people kind of acknowledging the absurdity of the situation they find themselves in. So Jack and Anna Hell, they've had a long working relationship at this point. They've been working for 10 years of independent publication. They've been working together. And so I want them to just share a moment where they just kind of look at each other and just at least acknowledge that, like, this is wild, right? This is buck wild. This isn't normal. Then we get to the kind of ominous moment in the story. I'm picturing that we're going to have this super dark and gritty Superman arriving on the scene, the kind of the dark version of this character, the darkness in this dream, and they're going to be saved by somebody, by the kind of the true Superman. Now, this is like a kind of crystal clear moment that popped into my head when I was thinking of this story. I just thought of a song. I thought of Karma Police by Radiohead, and the line, I'm not going to sing it, but for a minute there, or a moment there, I lost myself. And I just seemed like, oh, that would be a really cool line to paraphrase. That we're going to, when the true Superman emerges from this kind of morass of imitators and weird alternate versions, once we get to the heart of the idea, he's going to be himself again. And I want him to say something to the effect of, oh, sorry, folks, I lost myself for a moment there. And then, of course, I was like, we have to get to the emotional heart of the story. This is what it was all building up to. So I'm like, well, now we have the true Superman, if you will, who, I hasten to add, is a fictional character in our universe and is a fictional character in Jack's universe as well. He is a comic book character, but he carries the same weight, the same kind of mythos, the same cultural impact to Jack that he would do to us. So this is me going, okay, so how do my comic book characters get to interact with this legend of a character? What could they learn from him? And what would he have to say in this moment? So I'm like, okay, well, they have to interact. The characters have to kind of talk to each other. And now I have to start thinking to myself, what are they going to say? And probably in my overview at this point, I would just write in brackets, and then they say something deeply profound and moving. Close brackets, worry about that later, basically. So, this is what I mean about sometimes it's okay to have the intent of a scene at this point. It doesn't have to be fully formed. You can come back to that later. So, this is where the conclusion is, the denouement, if you will, where I'm like, okay, Superman, having vanquished all these kind of pale imitations of himself, there is now only one version of the character left, and he's fading away because he's a fictional character. And while he has, quote unquote, died in this instance and ended up in the afterlife, in reality, he's just been rebooted. This is what happens to a fictional character of such weight and magnitude as Superman in this universe. Like, every time he gets killed, maybe in like a major headline-making storyline from like 1995, I think, or something like that, he takes a brief trip to the afterlife, regathers himself, and then comes back for another generation of fans. So it's only a brief meeting, but they get to say goodbye to each other. And I basically want to end on this point where Jack, our hero, has learnt something. And maybe we don't necessarily vocalize it, but I want it to be clear from the visuals that he's kind of regained something. He's back to himself, and maybe it took learning something from Superman to do that. So that's my overview. So again, I apologize for the amount of text. It was intentional because I just want to show how much of a dump of information it can be at this point. Like, get down as much or as little as it takes. Just think about all the things you want to include. Now, we're going to be refining this in a moment. So if you are playing along at home and you're thinking about your crazy story involving a floating island and such, this is where you could be scribbling down some ideas about what you want to happen in that story. And again, feel free to leave it as messy as you need to. So a thing I like to do at this point is I like to break down the action that we've just described into scenes. Oh, pardon me. Sorry. I like to break down the action into scenes. Now, I think the word scene can be a little inelegant sometimes because when we think of a scene in terms of, I don't know, theatre or a play or a stage, a movie or a book, it's very easy to think of a scene as being perhaps tied to a location or a particular moment in time. I sometimes prefer the word moment. I try to use scenes and moments interchangeably at this point. Or maybe chapter is a good word. Because what I've done here is I've taken all the action I've just described to you in meticulous detail, and I've broken it down into what I like to think of as DVD chapter headings. So for those of us who remember DVDs, if you are kind of skimming, trying to find your place in the middle of a movie, you would be able to skip between chapters. And these would all often be given a weird little name. So this is something I like to do. I like to name my sections. And it helps me organize them later in my head. So what I've done here is I reckon that of my entire overview, it really boils down to 4 scenes or moments. So we have Golden Perfect, which is where Jack and Anahel are talking with the true Superman before he fades away. We have Battle Royale, which is where Jack is in the midst of all these warring Supermen. The Daily Grind, which is the initial scene we talked about, where Jack is at his desk, he's fed up, he needs a change. And we have Mistaken Identity, where Anahel saves Jack, but then menaced by the evil Superman. Now, there's no hard and fast rules as to where you draw the line. No one's going to check, and no one's going to hold you accountable. This is just as you choose to categorize and sort out your scenes and moments. So if you think of these cards on the screen as like post-it notes, you'll notice that they're just in any order. They're just kind of scattered across the page, because I think it's important at this point to recognize that you probably won't be writing your overview in chronological order. I think actually you should be encouraged not to. Like, just get the ideas down as they come to you, which is what I've tried to represent here by scattering things across the page. Now, what we need to do now is we know that we're making a 10-page comic in this instance, because the Golden Age is a 10-page comic. So now it's a case of assigning pages. So how do we talk about how long is each kind of scene or moment going to be? Well, we know what we're working with. It's 10, so we have to divide these up. Now, this is just going to come down to personal taste, and it's going to come down to how busy you think a scene is going to be. So I'm just going to show you what I've done here. So in my instance, I'm thinking that Golden Perfect, the big conclusion of the story, where Jack and Anahel talk, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of dialogue there. That this is the heart of the story. So I want to give that the time and space it requires. So I'm going to give it 40% of the story. I'm going to give it 4 pages. We have Jack in the midst of a crisis when all the Supermen are fighting each other. Well, I'm like, okay, well, that's big on spectacle. It's going to be very dramatic to look at. But I only have 10 pages to work with. Is it really what the story's about? No, it's just setting up the concept of the story. Now, Jack at his desk, this is our kind of cold open. I'm like, that's very simple. It's Jack at his desk. He's unhappy with his job. So I'm only thinking 1 page. And of course, if we count up, that means we only have 3 pages left to play with. So if you were, looking at this and going like, oh, well, I definitely need 4 pages to tell Golden Perfect, but I definitely need 4 pages to tell Mistaken Identity as well, then you've got too many. So this is where knowing your page count is very important. And writing an overview will help you ascertain the weight and importance of each scene. You're going to realize which scenes deserve pages and which ones don't. Like going back to Battle Royale, if I really, really wanted to emphasize the fighting, if I want to emphasize the explosions and the cool lasers, that's, I'm going to struggle, because this is only a 10-page comic and I have to think about where I choose to spend my allowance of pages appropriately. So this is a point where you can chop and change. You can, add pages to one section, remove them from another, do what you need to balance the equations. But for me, at least, I'm happy with this because this adds up to 10. I'm just going to double check in case I've done something stupid. No, it adds up to 10. That's great. So this is how I'm going to allocate my pages. Now, we've got to order the scenes. So say like your overview is a just kind of random collection of notes in non-chronological order. This is why I like doing this scene where I start kind of planning out my scenes and moments. Because what I'm doing now is I'm assigning orders, and it's just they're just post-it notes stuck to a board. So I'm saying that the daily grind, which is Jack at his desk, we already said that this is going to be our establishing scene. So for me, that has to be first. Now, Battle Royale. That's also doing a lot of setup because we're cutting from Jack in his office to the midst of his crisis where all these Supermen are fighting each other. So, that has logically to follow. Same goes for Mistaken Identity. I'm like, okay, well, that's the Anna Hell's now on the scene. We're going to see the evil Superman, the true Superman's going to appear, which sets up all the pieces for our big conclusion, which is Golden Perfect, which is really the heart of the story. Apologies, just having another drink. So this is how I'm ordering all the events in the story. And I do actually do this. I take the time to title all my kind of chapters, scenes, and moments. I give them a page allocation written next to the title, and I number them accordingly because I'm like, okay, so now this is the foundation, basically, that means that I can start writing my story without worrying about where these pages are going to be spent. There was honestly a time when I was initially trying to write comics, before I knew anything about anything, where I would just start writing at the beginning and then, get to like page, 22, when the issue is meant to be ending, and realize that like I'm only halfway through my story because I ran out of time. I ran out of space. And so I always go in with a plan now, and it's really been very beneficial for me. So now that we have assigned a page count to each scene, the trick now, and this is really, if you're going to take one thing away from this, I would really recommend that you develop a page plan for each of your stories, because the goal here, and this is essential for me, is being able to write one sentence or one line of text for every page in your comic. Doesn't matter if you're writing a 10-page comic, a 4-page comic, or a 100-page, kind of graphic novel. I think it's really important that you know what's happening on every page of your story. And it doesn't have to be a full sentence. It could just be a collection of words. But the beauty of this is that when you take your overview, which, jumping back, looks like this, when you combine that with your kind of scene plan, which might look like this, and you ultimately combine it with your page plan, you will never be in any doubt as to what's happening at every page, every moment of your story. And you'll also know that because you've pre-assigned all your page count to every section, everything's been paid for, if you will. You're not in debt in terms of pages. And that's very liberating because it means you can just dive into writing the thing without worrying about how you're going to afford, with the currency being pages, how you're going to afford these awesome moments down the line. So with this in mind, as you can see, I've broken down this page plan to indicate where the 4 scenes or moments kind of lie. I've color coordinated them just so you can see where one ends and another begins. And if you look on the left side of the screen, you'll also notice I've got these weird kind of circle symbols down the left. These are basically meant to show you where how the pages fall. So this is a way of keeping track of pagination. So I know that because mine is an even numbered comic, the first and last pages are going to be standalone pages. If you picture it like a book being bound. They're going to be single pages, whereas pages 2 and 3, that's a double page spread. 4 and 5, that's a double page spread, and so on and so forth. If it's a book that's being read from left to right, a double page spread is always pretty much going to begin on an even numbered page. So this is very important because comics are quite an unusual medium in that the reader has a lot of control over the progression of time. As much as you try to set up how reality passes, how time passes in your comic, it can be difficult to surprise a reader, for example, if they can just flick back and forth as they wish. So this is very important in comics because knowing how the pages fall is really going to help you decide how and where you put your key story beats. So if you want a bit of power, if you want a bit of kind of creative power as a writer or an artist, and you want to surprise or shock the reader, think about putting those big reveal moments after a page turn. At the same time, if you want to do a double page spread, if you want to have an image that goes across 2 pages, or if you want to have the action move horizontally across a spread rather than vertically on a single page, you obviously can't do that if it's not on if it falls across a spread. So, for example, Battle Royale, the 2-page scene, that runs across pages 2 and 3. That is a double-page spread. If I so wished, maybe I could do something with that. Okay, but again, enough rambling. What I'm doing now is, with that in mind, I'm going to create a sentence for each page in the comic. So, as we said, Daily Grind, the opening scene, this is a very easy one. It's only 1 page, so the scene and the page description are exactly the same. Jack is at his desk, mountains of paperwork, there's a crisis developing. Battle Royale. So, again, a 2-page scene, and I'm thinking, we open with Jack running for his life, chaos everywhere. The next page, one Superman defeats another, dissolving into gold light. And as I said before, that's an important moment to me because I want to establish the rules of this story so the reader knows exactly what's happening in the moment. Mistaken identity, 3 pages. Anna Hell saves Jack. They share a moment. This is weird. Evil Superman approaches. Dark, menacing, saved at last minute by a blast from off-panel. And then a splash page, the true Superman is revealed. Radiant, brilliant light. Now, for me, this is the big moment in the comic. And again, the example, you can see it for yourself in the link in the chat if you want to look at the PDF. But this is a full-page image. It's big, it's bold, it's meant to evoke a lot with the artwork. And I know Gav did a brilliant job in bringing that to life. But for me, I'm like, okay, if we're going to have at the end of page 5, somebody has come in from off-panel, we don't know who it is, they've saved the day, there's a big page turn, page 6, we get the splash. So this lined up perfectly when it came to delivering that reveal. Final scene, 4 pages, Superman regains his senses, Superman talks about reboots, meanwhile the other Supermen fade away. The true Superman starts fading away. Jack asks him how he keeps going on. Jack thanks Superman, says goodbye. Jack smiles. He learns something. So again, this is the concluding part of the story is where the the themes of the story are really brought to light. Everything I've been kind of telling you about, everything I wanted to achieve with this story, and you'll also notice that the page plan doesn't convey emotion, it doesn't convey action, it doesn't convey pathos. As much as I feel very confident now that I've planned out this story, at the same time, I still have to go write the thing. So I just want to kind of say at this point, as much as I'm giving you some very kind of like mechanical, robotic rules on how to kind of tell a story, they're really only telling you how to plan out your story. When it comes to writing it, that's still on you. So the way this has benefited me over the years is that I now, when I develop a story, I can develop a page plan, I can have an overview, I can have these kind of resources ready before I even start writing the script. And because the part of my brain which is worrying about the thing fitting into the page count, the thing making sense, because that's already been sorted, it's actually quite freeing, because now all I have to worry about is being creative. And all these kind of like big ideas I had, and which I bored you with earlier, about how I wanted to talk about the nature of a reboot. I wanted to talk about how do you find the strength to keep going on, talk about what makes a character iconic. That's me setting the bar quite high. And if I want to achieve these things, it's still hard work, and I'm going to have to really kind of, put effort in when it comes to the script. So this will not tell the story for you, but it will hopefully clear your path to tell a great story. So, okay, as promised, the final stage here is you're going to turn your story into panels. Now, you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to go through the entire flipping story, because we would be here all night. But let's look at the simplest part of the story, which is the opening scene, daily grind. We know it's one page, so we've only got one page to work with. So when I turn the story into panels, knowing what we've talked about, knowing everything that needs to happen on this page, everything we covered in the overview, I'm now thinking, okay, what is it going to take to convey that as a comic? So this is where you're really breaking it down into the smallest possible moment. So when I think about this scene, the first thing that kind of sprang into my head was the comedic beat, the idea of Jack almost having a bit of a sulk because he's not allowed to go on adventures, because he's stuck in the office doing boring paperwork while cool explosions are happening elsewhere. So I was imagining him, okay, we'll go for a bit of visual kind of slapstick comedy. We'll have him face planting the table because he's, in a mood. Now, again, great for comedy. What if we have the same camera angle, but he suddenly just kind of snaps to attention with a funny look on his face because he's found out a loophole. He's found out he can get out. So for me, that's the comedic beat I want to hit. And I'm like, okay, if that's going to work, I need 2 panels to tell it in. So right off the bat, I'm not worrying yet about the order in which these appear on the page. I'm just going, okay, we have to have him face planting, and we have to have him reacting when he hears the good news. Now, given everything I was talking about, I think we'd be kind of stuck if we don't include an establishing shot. We have to show that Jack is at his desk, swamped by paperwork. It'll be a nice kind of visual representation of what he's going through. I also think, because I said in my overview, we're going to be cutting back and forth between Jack and his table and Marie at the kind of scene of the crisis. So I'm like, okay, we need a shot of Marie. We need a shot of Marie kind of screaming into a radio, while she calls, Jack from kind of ground zero. And then I'm like, okay, well, it's only a single page. And while, there's really nothing stopping me from having 17 panels on this page if I really wanted to, it would be getting a little crowded at that point. So some people might tell you that, like, there's a hard and fast rule that says a page has to have 5 panels on it. Like, that isn't true. I mean, it's a good guideline for balancing the density of dialogue and speech bubbles with the artwork, so both have time to shine. 5 to 6 panels is often quite a comfortable fit. But for every example you could find of someone following that rule quite precisely, you'll find 100 examples where people have done the exact opposite and made it work. So there's no rule here. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. In this instance, I want to do a 5-panel page because I think that's just a good fit. So with that in mind, I know I really only have one other panel to work with. And I'm thinking, you know what? Let's have another shot of Marie. There's going to be some dialogue here. It's got to be presented in a visually interesting way. So we've already got 3 panels of Jack. Let's have 2 of Marie to balance it out. It means we can bounce back and forth between the 2 characters as they talk to each other over radio. Now, because I'm presenting this story to you with the benefit of being a future person looking back on a story that's already been developed, these panels exist because the story has now been made. So these are the same 5 panels in order, but how they eventually got turned into artwork by Gav. So again, we have Jack face planting. We have Jack perking up when he gets the good news. We have Jack at his desk, swamped by paperwork. We have Marie kind of calling from ground zero and trying to get Jack's attention. And we have another panel of Marie. So I wrote those down in the order they came to me. I now have to think about the order they're going to actually appear in the story. So I think, oddly enough, that because I want to do something like in media res, I just want to be right in the thick of the action, I think that we should start with Marie screaming into her radio. It's going to create a sense of urgency. It's going to create a sense of good confusion in the reader. They're not going to know what's going on, but hopefully they're going to want to find out. And then let's get the immediate juxtaposition of Jack stuck at his desk, being grumpy because he's not there. So right off the bat, 2 fun, establishing panels, very different energy, very different setting, very different tension. So hopefully we're getting a sense of urgency, we're getting a sense that something fantastic is going on, but we're also getting a sense of the mundane and the boring, which is kind of, butted up against. So we went from Marie to Jack. I think it only makes sense to go back to Marie, like a game of tennis. So I think this is the order these are going to appear. And as I already said before, the remaining 2 panels are meant to be a comedic beat. So they have to go Jack face planting, Jack perking up. So that is how I think I need to order those moments. So now it's a case of like scene missing while I run away and write the script, but it turns into this. So this is how it all came together in the end. And as it happens, I was very pleased with the final result. I think this was kind of everything I was hoping to achieve. And I kind of have included all these meticulous examples of the process that went into it to kind of indicate that sometimes even a throwaway kind of joke can require a lot of planning. So for me, it's often a case of like, I list everything that absolutely needs to happen for a story to work. Then I try to put it in the order that makes the most sense. Okay, and great. So now I have like a necessary but boring framework for tricks to go away and make it interesting. So again, going back to the idea of the kind of group exercise, I hope this hasn't been too overwhelming for you as we work through this, but that's kind of my process. We're going from summarizing your story as a sentence, as a paragraph, as a list of key developments, to writing your overview, which is this big, messy kind of conglomeration of ideas, breaking it down into these small post-it notes about what a scene should be, and then getting a page plan. So the page plan is really what you should be aiming for. Like, nobody's saying you have to do all these steps. I'm not an expert, and I'm not the king of comics. You can do whatever you please. But if I could recommend one takeaway point from this, I would recommend trying to produce a page plan for your story. And if you are playing along at home and you're trying to develop a story that features a floating island, a message in a bottle, a creature in love, and an alternate power source, again, try to think about how you're going to allocate the action across 8 pages. Because again, while this is a 10-page story, the plan tonight is we're going to develop an original 8-page story. Okay, so if we get back to where we were, one thing I should say that might be of interest is, now that you kind of know this method, it might be interesting to go back to a story you admire and kind of retro engineer it, work backwards from the final product, like turn it into a page plan. Now, I did this for Earth 2, which is one of my, it's a graphic novel I very much admire, by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. And it's an original graphic novel, so it's not a trade paperback, it wasn't made up of collected issues. It's an original 96-page story written by Morrison, illustrated by Quitely, featuring the Justice League and a parallel universe where good is evil and evil is good. And I think it's quite a clever, very concise story that kind of does a lot with the pages it has. So when I was working on Afterlife Volume 6 in particular, that was going to be a 100-page story, so a story of similar length. So I was like, you know what? I want to learn something. I want to see how a very, very good creative team did something similar. So I went back to Earth 2, a book I've owned for years, and I broke it down into a page plan, which basically I did in like Microsoft Excel. So this is a screenshot of my page plan. I've spared you all 96 pages of it. But I tried to describe what happened on every page, and I color coordinated it into what I thought were scenes or moments. Now, maybe someone else working with the same material would interpret this differently. They might break the scenes down into even smaller units, but this is just how I felt it made sense to me. And I found it very interesting. I found it very educational. I really would recommend you do the same for any comic you enjoy, any comic you think you could learn something from. Another interesting thing, and this is a conversation for another day, so I won't bore you with it now, but if you study story structure, anything relating to 3-act structure or, I don't know, screenplay writing, that sort of thing, might be interesting to overlay that over the page plan. Because one thing I found that was quite interesting is if you take even the most basic interpretation of a 3-act structure and how and where these major story beats should fall, I actually found that when I overlaid them on this 96-page story of Earth 2, they lined up pretty well. So, you know, where you're meant to get a, for example, inciting incident, where there's meant to be a low point, rising action, that sort of thing, depending on how much you care about that sort of thing. I actually found they lined up very well. And while I'd never really studied story structure growing up, I do wonder if sometimes the stories we find the most satisfying are the ones which, at least on a subconscious level, do follow certain rules. So yeah, something to try at home. Could be interesting. So yeah, okay, so going back to the group exercise. So this is where, again, if you've been working on this at home, bravo, good for you. Like I said, no one's going to check your homework. But what I did was I gave myself the same challenge. So I have kind of cheated in that here's one I made earlier. But to prove that this isn't something I made months and months ago, well, I can't prove it. You just have to take my word for it that I did this just a couple of hours before we came online tonight. So this is relatively fresh in my head, but I tried to give myself the exact same challenge. So can we plan out an original 8-page comic working from this story prompt, which was generated by a random story prompt generator online? The internet can occasionally be a wonderful place. So yes, a floating island, a message in a bottle, a creature in love, and an alternate power source. So I started to think about how I can make this interesting for myself. And it occurred to me, I was like, okay. So if we're going to have a creature in love, I want them to be living on a floating island, and I want them to be alone. So yeah, again, very lonely, looking for love, friendship, a companion. And this little creature in my head, I kind of picture them as being like just a little kind of furry, bipedal, cute little creature, kind of unknown to science sort of thing. In no way threatening, just very cute, cuddly. I don't know, maybe something like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch or something like that. And I was also thinking, okay, it's a floating island. I went for an island floating on the ocean. And I was like, okay, well, could this be a turtle? Maybe it's a turtle with an island on its back. So for me, my summary in one sentence was, a lonely creature living on a floating island finds a message in a bottle and sets out in search of love. And then to extrapolate those ideas a little further, a strange furry creature lives on a floating island that is actually a giant turtle. He finds a message in a bottle that promises a cure for his loneliness. Feeding the turtle an extremely hot chili pepper for propulsion, the creature sets out in search of the writer of the note. So again, this is just my interpretation. I'm not saying this is the right or only way to tell this story. This is just how I chose to look at it. And again, summarize it in a sentence, summarize it in a paragraph. We have the key developments. So these are the moments that I think have to happen for the story to work. I want the creature to find the message in the bottle. That's obviously the thing that kind of gets the story going. I want the creature to see smoke on the horizon. So there's like a thread to follow, a trail of breadcrumbs. That's the thing that goes, aha, yes, maybe that's where the bottle came from. I want them to go and pick an extremely hot chili pepper, and I want them to feed it to the turtle to create a kind of gaseous jet propulsion sort of thing. And then finally, I think my conclusion will be that the creature and the turtle arrive kind of at a kind of just perfectly normal coastal town, delighted to have found the source of a bottle, but everyone is just shocked. I'm kind of imagining this will be quite a light-hearted, kind of harmless comic, quite cute, quite funny. I'm almost kind of picturing it almost might be entirely silent, so almost dialogue-free. The key question, will the creature find a cure for loneliness? So, overview. So this is what I mean about not necessarily writing in chronological order, because oddly enough, the first thing that sprung to my mind is probably the conclusion of the story. And I'd like to play this for laughs. So I'm kind of picturing a girl standing on a kind of like the edge of the water in her hometown. It's the seaside, absolutely drenched. And we're going to just cut open on her face. She looks kind of shocked and confused, a little surprised. And she has a message in a bottle. You know, maybe she's getting ready to send another one. And then the camera's going to pull back and we're going to see that the creature is there, kind of delighted, absolutely delighted. It's very cute. It's non-threatening. Delighted to have arrived at the source of the messages and is kind of like, I don't know, dancing and bowing on top of the turtle's head. And the poor turtle is probably looking a little burnt out after its kind of gastric distress. Yeah, the wave of the turtle's approach has kind of soaked the town. So yeah, very lighthearted. And again, the juxtaposition of the fantastical and the normal. So yeah, this is literally the first thing that kind of sprung into my mind. We'll have just a comedic moment that concludes the story. I was like, okay, well, if the creature's going to have a happy ending where it makes a friend, it's got to be sad at the beginning. It's got to want something. It has to want a friend. So I'm thinking, okay, well, let's have the creature kind of wandering across the island, you know, being alone, being sad, wanting company. And the inciting incident, if you will, is that they find the message in a bottle. So yeah, I think pretty self-explanatory. I've also mentioned again the thin trail of smoke on the horizon, which is very important. We've got some big concepts here. We've got a kind of turtle, that's an island. We've got a weird little creature living on it. I think it's important that we establish that. So I'm like, okay, well, we need a moment where we just show it. You know, we need a moment where we see the setting of our story. So I'm picturing this is all very sunny, very beautiful. You know, we're going to have clear skies, blue water. I'm picturing this as quite a pretty and visually appealing comic. So yes, we'll have our opening establishing shot of the island, and the turtle is the island, and it appears to be asleep. I then, you know, the kind of the action of the story is I'm picturing we're going to have the chili. I'm kind of picturing we'll have like a little patch of chilies growing in the middle of the jungle. We'll have the creature going to pick one, and for comedic purposes, maybe it should be a particularly large and evil-looking one. And then again, because I try to write what amuses me, and clearly I just have a toilet brain, because I'm like, okay, well, we'll have creature waving the chili in front of the turtle's nose. The creature's going to be tiny, kind of sitting on top of the turtle's beak. The turtle's going to eat it. We'll have a moment of quiet, a moment of silence. We'll just let that kind of, you know, gesticulate. Gesticulate is the wrong word. We'll let that kind of ferment for a moment, both the comedy and the chili. And then I figure we'll see bubbles emerging from the rear end of the island. We'll zoom in for a tight close-up on the turtle's eyes. It snaps open. We'll see the pupil kind of narrow to a point. Uh-oh, something bad is coming. And then we'll have the creature, this cute little creature that we're following, we'll just give like a kind of grin because it's working as planned. And then I was like, okay, and then surely let's milk this for all the humor we can get out of it. We will have the tranquil ocean. We'll have the kind of flat seas, and we'll have a man in a boat. Maybe he's fishing. He's just kind of enjoying the sunshine. And then we'll get like a distant rumbling. Something's coming. There'll be a colossal wave, which will kind of like tip the man out of his boat. But because this is like a kid-friendly comic, there's going to be no real peril. And then we'll just get a shot of like the turtle moving like a kind of an absolute rocket at like Mach 5 or something across the surface of the ocean, kind of propelled by its own gaseous emissions. And we'll get the little creature, the cute little furry thing, kind of holding onto the palm tree for dear life, grinning like an idiot. So again, talking about kind of writing things in non-chronological order, those were the moments as they occurred to me. So again, we're going to repeat the process from before, and what I reckon we have here are five scenes, if you will, 5 scenes or moments. And once again, I have assigned them a kind of DVD chapter style title, better for kind of cataloguing them and organizing them in my head. And we have to allocate our kind of 8 pages. We only have 8 to play with. So again, that initial moment I described, the one of the girl on the pier soaked by the wave, I picture that as being 1 page. I think that's all we need to tell that. It's just going to be a few comedic beats. I'm like, okay, one and done. That's all we need. Loneliness. So the creature on the beach kind of finds the message in the bottle, sees smoke in distance. So, we've got a couple of actions to portray there. At the same time, it'd be nice to have a bit of space to just show the creature kind of moping along, feeling sorry for itself. So I think 2 pages. Adrift. Well, the opening shot of a turtle is going to be very beautiful, but not a lot's actually happening other than conveying the kind of beauty and emotion and wonder of the scene. So really just one page. I think that's all we need to worry about. Now the hot stuff. Why not 2? If you've been keeping count of the page tally, that currently takes us up to 6 pages. So that really only leaves 2 pages left for the man in the boat getting kind of capsized by a turtle moving at incredible speed due to gastric distress. So again, as before, you can chop and change these. You can move them around, move your allocation around so that you're happy with it. But for me, I'm pretty chuffed with this. I think this is exactly the kind of pocket money, if you will, in terms of pages, the allowance of pages to make this happen. So again, the overview was written in non-chronological order, but I think it's clear to me that the establishing scene, Adrift, 1 page, has to be the opening moment of the story. If we've established that there's an island, which is actually a turtle, then I think it follows that we should have an establishing scene where we show that there is a creature living on the island and they are lonely. But also at the end of that scene, they see smoke in the distance. So they have made a decision to drive the story forward. And to drive the story forward, and the turtle for that matter, they're going to have to get a chili and feed it to the turtle. So, that's what comes next. And in the natural kind of law of thermodynamics, if you actions, reactions, and all that, if you feed a turtle a chili, it is of course going to rocket across the ocean like a fireball. So that has to follow, and then that very neatly leaves us with our conclusion, which is the girl on the pier soaked by the wave and the creature on the turtle's head. So for me at least, I think that works perfectly. So again, let's quickly run through a page plan. I swear I won't be keeping you all much longer tonight. So again, I've color coordinated the sections of the page planner to match the scenes. We have begin and end with a 1-page scene. Everything else is 2 pages. So Adrift, 1 page, 1 scene, establishing shots of island. We move in closer. We learn that it's a turtle. Loneliness, the creature walks on the beach, lonely, finds a message in a bottle. 2, reads the message, its heart beats, we see smoke, it makes the decision to head in that direction. We cut to the jungle. I'm picturing that's where the chilies are. The creature picks the biggest and most evil looking one. The creature feeds the chili to the turtle. We get those bubbles from the rear end of the island. We see pain on the face of the turtle. We cut to the calm ocean, man in boat, fishing, a moment of tranquility before a big rumble as something draws close. We get a massive wave, the turtle rockets forward, creature holding on tight and grinning, and then finally we get a hard cut to the pier where everyone is soaked, but the turtle has arrived. The poor turtle's looking a little burned out, but the creature is very happy. So you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to inflict developing panels on you. although I will have another sip of the drink. But yeah, that's how I would break down this story. So for me, at least now, I would feel very confident beginning a script. Like if I want to start writing my script on page 4, I think I could, because I know exactly what came before. I know exactly what came after. If I want to write it in chronological order, I can. If I don't, I have this resource, this amazing resource to hand, which means I will never be surprised at any point in my story. So yeah, so that was basically a method, my method. It is absolutely not the method or the only method. I would never want to tell people this is how you have to write a comic. It's just something which has benefited me. I think more than anything, it's very important that you just find your own method. You find something that works for you. One thing I think which is quite useful about this method is that it's not going to dictate how you bring your script to life. That's still on you. I think this method can be quite beneficial because it just provides you with a series of tools which will allow you to then dive into your script kind of with wild abandon, basically, because you've created a summary, you've created an overview, a page plan, and you've started breaking your story down into panels. So just one more thing before I leave. This is more kind of Jong's personal philosophy of writing comics, but I've often felt that any moment in a story can be either cool or necessary. And if you're very lucky, it's both. By which I mean the necessary moments are the backbone of your story. These are the things that absolutely need to happen. So, you know, if we look back at my story, my ideas for a little creature on an island, what's necessary is very robotic. It is creature finds bottle, sees smoke, feeds chili to turtle, arrives at destination. That is, frankly, the necessary flow of events needed to get the story from beginning to end. Now, a cool moment, on the other hand, cool is subjective, but for me at least, a cool moment is the funny beats. A cool moment is the funny moment where the creature feeds the turtle a chili. We wait a moment. There's a brief reaction on the creature's face. The chili's face. My words are dying. The turtle's face before the bubbles begin. That's the cool moment. The guy in a fishing boat kind of getting surprised because it's funny and because we can. That's cool. So I always try to balance the kind of the two things of being cool and being necessary. If you fill your story with nothing but cool moments, it will be completely style and no substance, and it may not even make that much sense. If you fill it with nothing but necessary moments, well, you'll definitely have a plot, but it will be quite kind of well, dare I say mechanical, maybe a little soulless. I think you've got to find the balance between the two. And one more thing I will say is I want to bring up examples of a couple of fringe examples. So fringe cases. So you might say to yourself, well, how do I define a scene or a moment if my story is nothing but two characters talking? Similarly, how do I define a scene or a moment when my 8-page comic is nothing but two characters beating each other up? Like, what does it mean to be a scene? What does it mean to be a moment? And this is why I try to separate the idea of a scene from a place or a moment in time. A scene, a moment, a chapter, it's almost more of a feeling. So there's an example here from a Planetary comic, artwork by John Cassaday, where two characters just have an incredible kung fu battle for what feels like, well, it's about 17 pages, like it's the whole flipping issue practically. And there's almost no dialogue, and it's just people punching each other. And if you wrote that down in a purely mechanical sense, you would say, page 1, they punch each other. Page 2, they punch each other. Page 3, they punch each other. That's not helping anyone, least of all you. Arguably, it is one scene, quote unquote, because it is just two characters fighting. But I would urge you to try and find the moments and scenes within that. So Who has the upper hand at one point? At what point is our hero wounded? Does it look like they're not going to be able to come back? When are they going to turn it around? You can always break something down into chapters and moments, and you can then give them a weird DVD title, because then you can start thinking about their weight. How many pages are you going to allocate to those moments? The same works for, if you just got characters talking for 8 pages. I mean, I've a sample page here from another one of my stories which is literally that. It's just 2 people sitting in a dark room, drinking and chatting. And again, I say that even though that's all that happens, they don't change location, there's no time jumps or anything, it ebbs and flows. There are moments where I'm like, oh, this is a moment, capital M, this is another moment. The first moment requires 2 pages, the next moment requires 1 page. You can always break it down. So yeah, I'm just going to say a brief moment of shameless self-promotion. I am currently kickstarting a journal, which is a kind of notebook you can use to bring your ideas to life. I feel kind of shameless bringing it up. I don't want to spend too long dwelling on it, but it's basically a customizable journal that talks about a lot of the processes we've gone through tonight. It has a load of templates to help you develop a summary, an overview, a page plan. You can check it out at www.comicwritersjournal.com. We're currently live on Kickstarter. We've been going about a week. We have incredibly hit our target, which is lovely. In fact, we're well over our target with 3 weeks to go. So I'm very much looking forward to getting this out into people's hands. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me talk. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat. Comments are always welcome. At the same time, please don't feel pressured to do so. I'll whack a link to the Comic Writers Journal in the chat if folks want to check it out. But again, I'm here now for another half hour if folks want to chat about anything. If you don't, I won't be offended. I'm very grateful you joined me. Thank you.